things. I'm a huge fan of 97th Floor, and I loved being here yesterday with all of you. I loved hearing Seth and Shonduras and the others. And speaking of juxtapositions, spring and skiing today, Seth and Shonduras, they had different thoughts on marketing, and I come from a different angle as well, doing mostly traditional marketing. So I'm excited to share with you some of my experiences and life lessons that I've learned in my 2 decades of storytelling. I've loved following 97th Floor in our magazines, and Chris Bennett and I, we're no relation, same last name, no relation. I get asked that a lot because he's so awesome. One of the things that I love about 97th Floor is the way they get involved in the community. They sponsor an awesome race every summer, the AF Canyon Race Against Cancer, and last year I raced that and talked to Chris at the finish line. And one of the things that I love about running is all the life lessons. You know, you can't finish a race, let alone win it. Not that I would know about winning a race, but you can't finish it if you haven't prepared, if you haven't put in that time. I also love how the body's capacity increases. When you first go out, when the snow melts and you can finally go out on the trails, running a mile is super hard. Then over the weeks, you add another mile, and pretty soon you can finish the half marathon. And I find that same thing with our minds and with our businesses. Our capacity can increase if we follow a plan and consistently work towards increasing that capacity. But not everything is like running, because in running there's a finish line. It's over, and you're so grateful that it's over, and you don't want to take 5 more steps after that. But in life there are really not a lot of finish lines. And so as I interview people, nobody's done with their business, nobody's done developing their character, nobody's done learning how to be a good human and a good family person and a good marketer. Those finish lines don't exist. And so all of the interviews that I do are in the middle of people's stories. And I love when they can process some of those lessons that they're learning and share them with me. So I thought I'd tell you just a little bit about my story really quick. I grew up in Idaho Falls as the daughter of a school teacher, one of 7 children. And I always knew I would go to college. I also knew I would have to pay for college. And so I had dreams of journalism. I had dreams of telling stories. I always wanted to be on the school newspaper and would look for opportunities to tell people's stories and read people's stories. And my first publication was called the Jeanette Gazette. And that was just a little handwritten newsletter that I did for my sister who played school. She became a teacher. I became a journalist. And sometimes when we're children, the things we're interested in are clues as to who we really are. I did graduate from BYU with a bachelor's and master's in journalism and worked my way through school at the student paper. That giant computer seemed normal at the time. Now I can't imagine that. At BYU, I was the editor of the paper, which was called The Daily Universe. So that's the most braggadocious title in the world, editor of the universe. And never had a better title than that. And then I married a fellow journalist, and together we started a business a couple decades ago. He has since started a second business that he mostly does. But this cartoon caught my eye a few years ago, and I keep it on my desk. It's the man talking to his wife across the table. I think firing me would be a big mistake, mostly because we're married and we need the money. So how many of you work with a spouse? Do any of you have that experience? Just one of you, okay. It's a unique, awesome, most 99% awesome experience, and that has been mine. And here's my little family. We're BYU fans, which is sometimes a painful thing to be. In 2000, so we started our business in 1998, but in 2000 we started the magazine division. And this was our first issue of Utah Valley Magazine. I can hardly look at the cover with Karen Ashton. She's wonderful, and Thanksgiving Point Gardens started the same time we did, so that was our first cover story. But we didn't know what we were doing with text treatment and Photoshop, and the shadows are all wrong, and there's not enough text on there. We used the wrong bevel. It's not great. But at the time, it was the fulfillment of a dream. I was 25 years old when that first issue rolled off, and it was really exciting. And I did not know that I had just birthed my most demanding child, because as the years have gone on, this is a really busy but fun life. This is our January cover. We name a person of the year every year, and this year it was Astrid Tuminez, who is the new president at Utah Valley University from the Philippines, and most recently an executive with Microsoft. And a fascinating story from being a homeless girl living in a hut to being a university president. Along the way, we've covered lots of people, lots of influencers. We talked a lot about that yesterday. More will come today. And that's been an interesting thing. When we started our magazine, Facebook didn't exist, no Instagram. I didn't send my first text till I think 2003, when one of the people I was writing about, Paul Allen, who was a tech entrepreneur that some of you might know, I was setting up the cover shoot with him, and I asked how he would like me to follow up, and he said, send me a text. I said, cool. Now I got to figure out how to send a text. And I'm sure I paid 10 cents, 25 cents, or whatever to send that one text to him. We've also started other titles along the way, Business Q, Bride, and we do a lot of custom publishing. So along the way, I have learned a lot of lessons that are consistent with people. Now, everybody is different. Everybody has a story. That's a common cliche, and I have found that it's very, very true. But I've also found that among all the differences, there are some commonalities among people who are successful, and by successful, I mean happy, productive, doing what they want to do in the way that they want to do it. And so I've compiled some of those commonalities, those attributes that really matter in my life as a professional listener. The first one is to stay focused. And I think this is probably the biggest challenge we all share right now is distraction, is the problem that we have of being able to check on every possible thing at any possible moment. The weather, the scores, our coworkers, our children. We can find out if they're at school, if we bing their phone, whatever. We can do that and distract ourselves to no end. A recent study showed that you will notice if your phone is missing before you know if your child is missing. And I have to say, I think that's probably true. And so what can we do to stay focused? Well, one of the things that I learned came from these 5 Olympians. One of the magazines that we do is Prosper, as Wayne mentioned, and it is primarily to feature network marketing companies. Different home-based business opportunities, and network marketing companies fit that bill. So a company named Kivana asked us to produce a magazine for them, and they had gathered some really cool distributors to be some of their master distributors, and they had this Olympic team. Now, on the far left, we have Bart Connor and then Nadia Comaneci, 2 Olympic gymnasts. Then Dan Jansen, speed skater, Micah Ruzioni, who was the goalie on Miracle on Ice, and Bonnie Blair. So that might be too old for some of you, but take it from me, these guys are pretty cool. And this was one of my favorite days of my career because we had all 5 of these people in Orem, Utah for a photo shoot. And we had them for about 4 or 5 hours because we were doing all the interviews and we were doing group photos, clothing changes, individual photos. So there was a lot going on, and having 5 people there to work through it, it took some time. The thing that I will remember the most about this day, other than Bart Connor still had some incredible muscles at age 53, but other than that, is that they did not get their phones out. They were with us for all those hours. And I kept noticing because I kept wanting to pull mine out to check. I mean, it's just a habit, you know. You just want to check the stocks. You want to check the weather, whatever you want to check. And I kept wanting to do that, but I was aware that they were not. And so I kept mine tucked away. And I thought, that is why they all won Olympic gold, is because when they were in the rink, they were in the rink. When they were in the gym, they were in the gym. And they gave me that same focus, even though I was probably kind of a nobody to them working on this magazine. But they focused on what they were doing. We all think we're good at multitasking, but I actually feel like the people I've interviewed who have been the most successful have mastered this idea of focus. There's lots of ways to train ourselves to do it, but I think it's very important for us to figure that out and then help our kids figure that out as well. So that's the first attribute. The second one is connect by being you. It's interesting, authenticity, that word came up a few times yesterday, I noticed in the sessions. Super important. We connect when we're authentic. We connect when we're vulnerable. Brene Brown has done an excellent job of teaching us how to be vulnerable, what that looks like, and how that can feel safe. And I have found that to be true as well. One of my interesting interviews was with Steve Young, and this was a while ago, you can tell, because his boys are young, and he now has 4 boys, and they're older than this. When we first started the magazine, of course I wanted, on the first issue, I wanted Steve Young, or Donny Osmond, or Robert Redford. Those were basically my 3 dream choices. And eventually, I have gotten to most of them. Robert Redford has still eluded me, if any of you have any ideas for me there. But Steve Young, a few years into the magazine, he tracked me down and said, you know what, we're ready to do it. The first issue he didn't want to, he didn't know who we were, which is a true point. He didn't know if we were some sort of tabloid or what was going on. And so he was not ready to do it. But then he was. And so he called me, we worked this out, and we set up a time that I would come over to their home in Provo, and we would do the photos and we would do the interviews. And I was excited about this. It was a warm summer night, and he explained where he lived, and it was an older farm home that had been remodeled, and there was some acreage surrounding it. So when I pulled in, followed his directions, pulled up to the house, since it had been remodeled, I was a little unsure where the front door was, which I know sounds very odd. But there was a door right there, and there was a window, and it was the laundry room, which just didn't feel like the front door, and I hadn't actually met him in person yet, so I was not wanting to do something awkward right off the bat. So I walked around the side of the house, and there was a door that looked more ornate, looked like this could be the front door. So I knocked on it, and then I heard his familiar voice, I know his voice, saying, "Jeanette, is that you?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Why are you knocking on my bedroom door?" Ooh, not the first impression I was going for. And I immediately turned all shades of red and was stammering and everything. That turned out to be the best start to the interview because we had a really good laugh over it. That connection made it so we could connect on a lot of different levels. Sometimes famous people are actually harder to interview because they kind of are used to the questions and the kind of the facade that they give the public. And so having that really personable yet embarrassing moment led to a good start to that interview. And it was one of my favorites that I was able to do. Anne Romney, similar thing. It was hard to get in touch with her. I ended up doing this. This is 2008, so it's a little bit older. It was right as they had left the first presidential campaign. And I had been trying to get lined up with her and tried all sorts of things. And I had a note on my desk saying, "Anne Romney or bust." I wanted the interview. But of course, they were doing all the national media and all of that. Well, finally, we were able to connect. She invited me down to spend a day with her in Southern California where she was going to be training some horses. And so on the flight down, I had this yellow notepad, and I'm a list maker. I don't know how many of you are, but I'd made a list of all these things. And the following day, I was in charge of a youth conference for about 100 youth. We were going to be going, taking them up to the mountains. And so on my top sheet, I had listed all the things I still needed to do. Gather first aid kit and call so-and-so for, whatever. And I had this list. So then when I showed up to Anne's stables, her equestrian facility, and we started talking, she immediately started saying things I wanted to write down. So I pulled out my yellow notebook, and I was like, ooh, I was going to hurry and flip that page because this was not, professional, all this list that I had. And as I flipped it, she saw it. She said, "Hey, you in charge of youth conference?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Oh, I love that. Let's talk about it. What's hard? What are you thinking?" And that helped us connect too. And it went from something I was trying to hide to something that led to our connection. And I just loved that lesson. That was us back then. We were both a little younger. And then just this last summer, she reached out to me. It had taken me so long to get a hold of her, but this last summer she reached out to me and we did an event together. And I think and she brought up the youth conference thing again, that she had remembered that moment of connection. So we need to remember that. Be a visionary. Yesterday Seth talked about the masses and how a large percent of the population, they don't want to do things unless other people are doing it. They don't want to watch TV shows unless everybody's doing it. And that's a fine way to be, and that is a large percentage of the population, what research shows. But the people that are the most successful don't think that way. They don't look side to side to decide how they're going to spend their time, how they're going to spend their life, how they're going to spend their skill set. And one of the people that taught me the most about this was Lindsay Sterling, a dancing violinist. Okay, what kind of genre is dancing violinist? It's a genre that did not exist. And that became her dream as a young child. She was taking classical violin. She got bored with just the perfection and the black and white notes. And she also was a talented dancer and athlete. And so she liked to combine those things. Well, as she started telling people about her dreams, of course, people were like, why don't you just teach violin? That would work way better. But she had a vision for her life. And you know what? She has an amazing YouTube channel and other social channels, an amazing influence. Was on Dancing with the Stars, should have won, came in second. She has been a real force for good and really changed the world because she had a vision for her life. Another thing that I thought was really cool and interesting about her, when she was doing Dancing with the Stars, she was also preparing to go on tour, which was going to start like the next week. Well, that's a crazy thing to do because most people who are on Dancing with the Stars, they drop everything and it's all about that. And so she would oftentimes only have maybe 4 hours to do a rehearsal that other people were giving 12. And so she's very open with her faith and her strategies and all of that. And so she told me, and I included this in the interview, that when she only had that many hours, she would pray and she would say, "Hey, I only have 4 hours and I need it to count for 12, okay?" And then that would work for her. And if she only had 5 hours to sleep, but she really needed 10, she would ask for the same blessing and would accomplish that. So she had a vision for her life and would ask for help getting that. And I love that and think that's part of her success. Be generous with compliments. How many of you can think of someone, in your pre-18-year-old life who said something to you you still remember, a positive thing? Do any of you have those moments, like a teacher or maybe a grandma, hopefully a parent, that said something to you that stuck and that actually influenced who you became? And they probably don't even remember that. This happened to me. I was in 3rd grade, and I was really quiet. Teachers always would say on my report card, she's bright, but she doesn't talk. You know, I was just a listener, and I still am. That's what I do. I listen to people for a living. And we had a substitute teacher, and she had used a big word and didn't explain it. She was a little bit gruff. And I went over to the classroom dictionary and looked up the word. And then I went and showed her, hey, I don't know why I decided to show her, but I did. And she said, wow, Jeanette, you're ambitious. And I didn't know what that meant. So I looked up that word in the dictionary, went to the A's, got a big smile on my face, and looked back at her and really felt that. Now, because she was a substitute teacher, I can't remember her name. I have never thanked her. I'm sure she doesn't remember that. But through my years of teenagehood and awkwardness and difficulty and shyness and the things I had to overcome, I would think, but I'm ambitious. You know, I have these other things that are setbacks, but I was told I was ambitious. And that rang in my head. I actually put the story a little bit away, hadn't thought about it for a while, until this last summer when I got this award in New York for being the top woman entrepreneur in media. I'm sure they didn't have a lot to choose from because it's a tough industry right now. But anyway, as I was back there getting that award and they were giving the speech before I got up to give my speech, they used the word ambitious a few times. And I had just that flashback to that 3rd grade teacher and thought, that made such a huge difference. And I love people. I love interviewing people when they're in their office and I see people walking by, maybe they're employees or coworkers, and they're positive to them. They give them compliments. Hey, you rocked that presentation yesterday, or whatever it was. That is a commonality among people who are successful and people who are happy, is they give compliments. It only takes like 5 seconds, maybe even less, to do that. And it doesn't cost anything. We can use whatever words we want, and it does not cost more to use awesome words. We can choose them, and they're all free. And I think we need to do more of that, be less competitive and more complimentary. Now, being insanely positive is similar to this. And it's funny because whenever I interview entrepreneurs, and every year we name the top 50 businesses in Utah Valley, and so I've interviewed a lot of them, they often say a lot of the same things. They talk about how great their team is, which I love, and it's very, very true. And then they talk about how they have been positive through the changes and the challenges, because every business has pivoted, every business has struggled. Some of the businesses that are the most successful are the ones that really went through a tough time, where they really had to hone in on what they were doing, get smart about their budget, and they ended up being better off for it. But that positivity, they always say that, but I also always observe that in the way that they speak of themselves and their industry and their competitors. And so I've had a few examples that have been repeated to me as well. So this is Hillary Weeks. She's a singer-songwriter and talented and fun, and she's known for her positivity. When I did the interview with her, she was starting a new little side business, and this was kind of the backstory behind it. She was at a meeting or at a conference where the person had said, we have 300 negative thoughts a day. And she, first of all, thought, I don't think that's true. And second of all, she thought, I wonder if it is true. So she bought herself a little clicker, like a little handheld clicker, and decided to count her thoughts the next week, just to see, just kind of do an experiment and maybe get back to that person and say, I think your stats are a little off. So she started counting her thoughts, and she realized she actually was having a lot of negative thoughts. The dog was barking too loud, the red light was too long, my kids didn't like my dinner, the deposit didn't go through as quickly in the bank as it should have, whatever it was. And she started realizing, okay, I'm having a lot of these. And by the end of the week, she said by Saturday morning, she didn't even want to get out of bed. She was so down on her life, when actually nothing about her life had changed. She still had the same income, same business, same husband, same dog. It was just that she had been counting and focusing on those negative thoughts. So she flipped the script the next week and decided to count her positive thoughts. And so as she started to do that, she started to realize, oh, it's a beautiful day. The birds are chirping. The red light wasn't too long. I got a new client. All those things that she noticed that were going well. And by the end of that week, again, nothing had really changed. But she was on top of the world, so excited about her career, her family, her health. And it was just a matter of focusing on the positives. And that is something I think we have to train ourselves for. Some of us are more naturally positive. That's a gift. If that's you, be grateful for it. If that's not you, then work on that. See that as a skill that you want to perfect. You've all gained a skill set. You all have a skill set in marketing and in technology and the different things that you do. Being positive, add that to your list of things you need to work on. Train yourself. Fill your mind with those positive thoughts and just focus on that. I do a story every year that reminds me again about this importance of positivity. 19 years ago when we started, one of the things I wanted to do was I wanted to be a positive force for good. So one of the stories that I started was high schoolers who will change the world. And I picked a high schooler from each of the area high schools with the help of the schools, because I obviously don't know all the students. And so they would give me ideas, and then I would choose from there. And then we would have these students come in for their photo shoot and interview. And one of the things that I love, it is such a vague title, Change the World, right? So they're not all going to be perfect ACT scores. They're not all going to be athletic Division I recruits. They're going to be quite different because each school kind of gave me different ideas. And then when I have all the ideas on the table, I'm like, okay, I need a musician, and I need someone who's been through hardship. And so I have a good range of these high schoolers who would change the world. So when they come in, some of them come in and they're like, I am pretty cool, you're lucky to have me. And others of them come in with their tuba for their prop, and they can hardly make eye contact. So it is a range of experiences that I have when they come in. And some of them, just want to talk forever, and some of them it's one-word answers, and so I really, really work on it. But the one thing they do have in common, I love to ask them the question, what do you love about your high school? And they all light up, and then they all tell me that they go to the very best high school in the whole valley. That they don't have cliques. They have the best school spirit. They have the best teachers. Everybody's friendly. Such a great culture. Well, statistically, that's really not true. There are a range of high schools that have various dropout rates, and you can measure the faculty's credentials, and there is a range. But these students think that they go to the best school, and that is why they're going to change the world, is because they see it that way. They don't look down around the corner and go, I wish I went to that school because those students are nicer. There's no bullying over there. They're not saying that. They're like, I'm in the best situation. And so I've noticed this as well with entrepreneurs and executives, that they feel like they're at a great company. And it's the best possible time to be in this industry. And it's the best possible moment. And that positivity breeds more positivity. And then those things happen that they talk about. And so I think that is a really important common attribute in people who are successful. Facing fears. This is another attribute. There's the whole fight or flight thing. We all have fears, and increasingly so, our younger people have a lot of fears and anxiety, and studies are showing that that is increasing. Facing our fears is one of the ways to find happiness and to find success. One of the stories that I do every year is my fab, and I'm sorry, this is low res. You might have to kind of squint. Maybe it'll make sense to you if you do that. But I do this article, the Fab 40, the 40 most fabulous people in the Valley. And the genesis of it was I love lists, and People magazine was featuring the 50 most beautiful people, which is intriguing, right? But I didn't want to be that shallow and name the 50 most beautiful people in the Valley, so I went for fabulous, which is, again, a vague term, but I like to be able to highlight a variety of different people. So this girl is Bree Ray. She went out for American Idol, super scary. She made it through a few rounds, but didn't become famous over it. But she now has a really budding career, and it was fun to have her. And she sang at our launch party for the magazine, and a song she'd written for her dad, and he was there, and it was emotional. It was really sweet. And it was really because she had faced her fears that she was able to share that much emotion from her songs. And so I think to face our fears, first of all, we have to acknowledge them. And I'm a writer, so I like writing them down. This is what I'm scared of, black and white. And then figure out how to face it, how to overcome that fear. One of my fears, and it's kind of ridiculous, is animals. I didn't grow up with pets. I grew up in southeastern Idaho, so there were animals around, cows and horses, but we never had pets. And I'm one of those people that I now have a dog, unfortunately. But before I had a dog and was used to it, I would kind of be, when I was at other people's houses because I was afraid the dog was going to jump on me. Anyway, for this fab shoot, this actual one, our theme was magic. We have a different theme every year. And I had this thought to get some white rabbits, real rabbits, to have in the photo shoot, to help people loosen up. And what I didn't realize is by borrowing these 4 rabbits. I was now the owner of them throughout the week of the photo shoots. And so this next video is me trying to take a picture myself with the rabbits. I can't do it.
Drop it.
I can't do it. So ridiculous. I couldn't even hold a bunny. In my defense, though, they were way bigger than I was picturing when I went to pick them up. They were very large. They weren't cute and little. But facing our fears, acknowledging them and facing them. So being a cheerleader is another really important thing that we can do for each other. It's not just something that happens at high school sports. We can be a cheerleader all the time. Neon Trees was one of my favorite interviews. When I do groups, it's fun, but it's also hard because I like to interview them individually so that I can really get a feel for their personalities. And then, the photo shoot is all together. So Neon Trees is based here in Utah, and a variety of personalities in the band, and different personalities than you see on stage, honestly. And a lot of times that's how performers are. When they're really big on stage, sometimes they're more quiet and reserved and nervous. So Tyler Glenn on the far left, he was the quietest of all. And in fact, he said at the end of the interview, he's like, I'm going to have to sit here for a while and just digest what just happened and digest our conversation. It was, I guess, a lot for him. But one of the things that I loved about what he said that when anything cool has happened for the band, like when their first single got played on the radio and when they won different awards, he said everyone in the band wants to call his mom because she makes it sound like the coolest thing that's ever happened. She just gets so excited and just, and they all love that cheerleader. They crave it. They crave her cheering for them. Even as successful as they are, they crave Tyler's mom cheering for them. And we all need that cheerleader. And we can be that cheerleader for our coworkers, for our teammates, whatever team you are on in your career, in your family, or even in actual sports. Kalani Sitake, who's the coach of BYU football, same kind of thing. He talked about how he needed a cheerleader because he was really kind of an unlikely candidate for the job to be head coach of BYU. That's a tough job. It's, they're really looking for something really specific. And he was not the front runner when the search began, even though he really wanted the job. And it was his wife, Timberly, who kept being like, you're going to get this. I can totally see it. And she would picture it and she would describe it to him. And when BYU did decide to interview him for this position, they were living in Oregon. And so BYU flew there to interview him, but they asked him to meet them near the airport. Well, he said, well, that tells me all I need to know. They're not even willing to drive into town to talk to me. So I really don't think this is going anywhere. And Timberly again was like, no, you're going to get it. You're amazing. You've got all the ideas. This is for you. And she was right. And he credits her with giving him the confidence he needed to go into that interview, which was at the airport, and to be able to land the job. And she continues to be a great cheerleader for him. Celebrate and document. Isn't it awesome that we can take photos so easily? And isn't it so sad that we don't have very many photos from our lives 20, 30 years ago? As I've tried to gather some different photos for things, I'm like, I'm not even sure I have a photo. My oldest is 21. Finding his baby photos is like super hard. And yet my younger kids, I have a lot of photos of. Now, I'm a professional storyteller. I enjoy writing. I enjoy taking photos. I think that way. I see a story in everything. But I encourage all of you to be the same way. So yesterday, Richie Norton was sitting right here during at least Seth's presentation. And he asked a question, and I was sitting behind, and I decided to kind of lean over and take a picture of him. One of the things that I found, it's an easy little service project, is to take pictures of people and then give it to them. It's also a great way to get their phone number if you want it, because you'll walk up and say, can I text this to you? Just a little thing. And so I saw Richie doing that, and I took a picture. And I noticed this morning that he had posted it, and that's a picture he never would have. You can't take a picture of yourself doing something. It's quite hard to do. And so that is something that a little service project that I love to do for people. One of the things Donnie Osmond he's been on our cover twice. There's only 2 people I've done that with, but we did him, he was on our 4th cover ever, and I was younger and wanted another try at it. So we featured him again on the cover, and his career has totally changed since then. So it was fun to get a second try at interviewing him. But one of the reasons that he wanted to do it and was excited to do it is because he had a photo in mind. He wanted to recreate the same photo, the same day, 40 years apart, the first night he had kissed his future wife. This was at Sundance at a particular table at Tree Room Restaurant. And so he had this idea. And so we did. We tried to get the dishes to match. We didn't actually come as close as I had hoped, but they matched their poses. I think they look amazing then and now. And it was because of that photo that was a treasure to him. That was one of the reasons he was willing to do the photo. I think it's important for us to take photos, not just of the big moments, but also of the little moments. I've also found it's a great networking tool to do this. So this is a photo from a couple years ago. I've been participating at the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women every March. It's actually going on now, and I'm not there, and I'm having some kind of major FOMO over it. But a couple years ago when I was there, I sat down at this event. I did not know these women when we sat down. We all just kind of sat down, hi. The session begins, and both of the women on either side of me asked questions. They had disagreed with something the panel was saying, so they headed to the microphone and asked their question. And I took pictures and videos like I did of Richie. I just thought this would be a little treasure for them to share with their colleagues or something. And so after they sat back down, I showed them the photos, and we exchanged contact information so I could get it to them. And then we stood up and took this picture and got each other's names and all that. Well, I didn't know this, but a couple months later, the woman in the orange scarf, Saida Brown, she became the president of the National Council of Women. Now, that's the organization that Susan B. Anthony was part of when, in the 1800s, when women were fighting for the right to vote. She became the president of that organization. And all of a sudden, because I had taken the photo, and because we had tagged each other online, and because we had become friends and started double tapping each other's things, she was a colleague, and a friend, and I've maintained this relationship and been able to work with the National Council of Women because I took a photo, because I documented that moment. And I find that's really an attribute of kindness and also connection, and it's a fairly easy thing to do. Reframing setbacks. Now, the people that I interview that are my favorite are the ones that can tell me actually some of their worst experiences, but then they process their way out of them and tell me what that led to. That was actually a blessing. It's actually a great pivot, great lesson learned that they were forced to learn. And so I think this is a critical attribute, a critical skill, is to know how to reframe these experiences. Stephen Covey, for example, I'm glad I got to interview him before he passed on, because he is a genius, and his phrases are still part of our culture, and just really a legend, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And what I didn't know, I probably should have known, but when he was a child, he planned to be an athlete, like a lot of his children and grandchildren have been. That was his dream. He was a healthy, athletic kid. But he started to have some bone deterioration, and he was on crutches for 3 years. And he had to put away his athletic dreams, and he started focusing on school and reading and being a thinker. And he says he looks back at that and goes, that was so awesome, because I would have chosen football. I would have chosen basketball over reading, over learning, over studying philosophies. And so that became really the training ground for who he became and what he became known for. And at the time, it didn't feel that way. So I'm going to tell you, okay, before I tell you my setback story, Alex Boyer. So this was my Christmas issue just a couple months ago. He spent time as a homeless person growing up in England. Some tough times, parents had split up, things were difficult, he was homeless. Well, he has worked his way out of that, and he's a successful performer. He's currently really focused on an anti-suicide message and wrote a song, Bend Don't Break, has an amazing video, and he's going around the country and really the world with that message. And he talks about his homelessness, just knowing that angst, knowing that feeling of desperation that became part of what has led to him being such a great performer and songwriter, is because he knows what some of those really, really sad moments feel like. So again, a setback that became an opportunity. So a few years ago, I had an experience that I couldn't have talked about without crying for about a year. But I think I'm okay now because I've learned the lessons, so I'm going to, in a rare moment, share this with you today. So this is what happened. This was the issue after I caused a problem, okay? So I ended up doing an issue on diversity, largely so I could learn, and so that my readers could learn some of the things that I had learned the hard way. So every July is our women's issue. We've done it for 19 years. It's a fun issue. I should probably also do a men's issue. That's kind of what my business cue largely is. So anyway, women's issue. And in my editor's note, it's usually a picture of me with the person on the cover, but some years in my July issue, I've done a picture of me with the other women on my staff as a way to thank them and let people see there are lots of great women that are working on what you're reading. And usually, the day before the photo shoot, I'd be like, okay, everybody just wear black tomorrow so that we all go together. Everybody wear black. And so we had done that, and then we'd looked like a hair salon for like 3 or 4 years. So I'm like, I'm going to shake this up, kind of done with the black. And I told everyone to wear bright colors, to wear solid, bright colors. So they did. Also, what you need to know about me is my writing style tends to be word plays, which can border on cheesy, but sometimes fun, like with Lindsay Sterling dancing clean, and Kalani Sitake, Rise and Route. So I like to take a little wordplay and just twist it a little bit, turn it sideways. And so combine the picture of us in our colorful clothing with my desire to write those kinds of headlines, and I'm going to show you what happened and see if you can see what might have been problematic. Not good. Not good at all. And great thing about digital content, you can change it immediately. One of the bad things about print is I cannot gather up all 50,000 copies, rip that out, rewrite it. And this was just me making a word play. Okay, I since know, very much so, that this was not okay. My article was not about racism at all. It was about the variety of personalities on our staff and how that brings color to our writing and whatever. Well, this started a firestorm that became a national firestorm with people pointing and laughing at me, pointing and laughing at Utah. It became pretty horrible, actually. The Salt Lake Tribune wrote 2 articles. Every news station in Salt Lake was reaching out to me wanting to do a story on this. I didn't really think, I know it was bad and wrong, but I'm like, is this really newsworthy? Anyway, I'm doing all these interviews, radio, TV, the Gawker, which was a really big online tabloid at the time. They were actually the people that broke the story. They were the first people to reach out. And people were blogging about it. There was a whole YouTube video with my name in the title and a profanity that starts with F. So it was really, really hard for me, and I felt like I had taken my whole career, flushed it down the toilet. Everyone's laughing at me. No one will ever buy an ad. No one will ever buy a magazine again. I was pretty devastated because I had made a really big blunder. And I thought, I can either do, I had told people lots of times, any news is good news. Any publicity is good publicity. But then when it was happening to me, I was like, is that cliche really true? I don't know. So, but I decided I had 2 options. I could hide, I could pretend it didn't happen, or I could really kind of own up to it and go through that painful process of kind of stepping out and saying, I'm sorry, teach me what I need to know. And that's why in the picture that I showed you previously, I interviewed Mia Love, who was one of our state legislators, our congresswoman, and other people of color, other people of different religions. It was a whole issue on diversity, and I just asked them, teach me what is offensive. What do people do that really is not right, including my headline? And I took a lot of flack from them over what I had done, but I also learned a lot and shared that with the readers. And I hope that if they talk about this at my funeral, this headline problem, that they will also say, but the next issue, she wrote all about diversity and phrases that should never be said, and here's why, and all of that. And so that became a learning lesson for me. Fast forward a few weeks, I get a call from the Huffington Post. And they asked me to come on this show, HuffPost Live, this online show that they had just started. They wanted me to be a guest talking about politics, and specifically about MIT. And I said, yeah, I could do that. I'm just wondering why you called me, because I'm not really in politics, so just let me know. And they said, well, we just Googled around and we found your name. And I said, well, what did you Google? I was just curious. And they said, controversial Utah woman. And my name came up because of this. So when they said that, I said, I don't know if I'm exactly who you think I am. I know why my name came up, but I'm not really a big pot stirrer on the national scene kind of person. But anyway, I agreed to do the show, and that started about 50 shows. I did about 50 episodes of HuffPost Live, and it was mostly current events. We'd talk about the different current events, and I would give my perspectives as a business owner, mom, whatever hat I had on at the time. And it became really cool and led to other opportunities as well. One of the cool things about that show is people would live tweet, and you could see people's comments, as it's happening. So the second comment down, guy Nikon, he says, this guest from Utah is single-handedly changing my opinion of the whole state. Now, I don't know what this person thought of Utah beforehand, But I think they probably had a negative impression, and I hope that I had changed it for the positive. That's what I'm hoping here. And it was all because of my biggest mistake, my biggest blunder, my most embarrassing moment, and owning up to it and learning from it. Our setbacks can do that for us, but we have to get vulnerable, we have to be open and honest, and I actually think people are pretty forgiving. I mean, how many celebrities have done something really stupid, and then they go on The Tonight Show or Jimmy Fallon or something, and they say, yeah, I'm an idiot, and everybody just kind of claps and forgives them. Like, that's honestly what really happens. We're very forgiving. And so when we own our setbacks, I think that happens for us. Okay, knowing the rules and breaking them, I think, is another attribute of success. Knowing what we need to do, knowing what's commonly accepted in our industry, and then figuring out a different way to do it. And one of the example that I wanted to show from this, this is a UV50 issue where we name the top 50 businesses. And Josh James and Andrew Smith are two of our local entrepreneurs, and I was doing a little video interview with both of them. They're both going to be getting one of the main awards at the gala. My theme for this year in the photo shoot was mind games, actually games, and so we had Rubik's Cubes in the photo shoot. So I'm going to flip to this video, and what I had asked them to do before this video rolled, I had handed them each a Rubik's Cube, and I said, okay, mess it up, and then hand it to each other, and we'll see who the first person is to get a side put back together, okay? So those were the rules, and this is what happened.
Even if you torn yours apart, I'm still going to get it faster than you are.
So Josh ran off set, got a Rubik's Cube I had not used yet, and brought it back. That's how he won.
He's always thinking a different freaking angle.
There was a little profanity in there, sorry about that. But these two genius entrepreneurs who've done super well, grown multiple businesses, I gave them the rules, and Josh James found a different way out. At first he tried to break the Rubik's Cube. He was going to pop it off and then plug them back in. I actually kept that broken Rubik's Cube as an example on my desk of ways to think of different ways to solve problems. And then Josh went off the set and just got a finished Rubik's Cube. That's how he won. So knowing those rules and then figuring out ways around them. Being passionate about your choices. So one of the things that I had asked this restaurateur, he has started multiple restaurants, including Bahio and Marley's and Rose's, a number of different things. And I asked him kind of an obvious question. I felt like I said, what made you want to start a restaurant? And he just laughed at me and he said, everybody wants to start a restaurant. And I kind of laughed back at him and I said, no, they don't. Everyone wants to start a magazine, obviously, you know. And we were both so passionate about what we were doing that we assumed everybody wished they were us. Isn't that funny? But when you have that kind of passion that you just think you have the dream life and you're sure everyone around you is wishing they were you, that is a key to success. That's an attribute that I feel like really matters. Last one I want to share is being iconic. This business Q issue that I just completed, put out a couple months ago, I attempted to identify 25 icons in our community. And these were people, but also iconic products, iconic deals that went down. And it was really, really fun and hard to identify iconic things. Now, by iconic, that means, or I was taking it to mean like one of a kind, game-changing, still matters decades later. These are like the icons. These are the Mount Rushmores of our business community. And I thought that was a really fun and difficult word to play with. One of the photographers that I used to do some of our cover photography, he talks about how one of his greatest sadnesses right now is that people are not taking iconic photos. We take a lot of photos. We take pretty good photos, but iconic photos. The Beatles on that walk, you know, that sidewalk. I can't think of the right word. What's that? Yeah, Abbey Road, perfect. Yeah, that photo, so iconic, okay? Some of the magazines in the 80s just had these iconic photos, and we don't see that anymore. And we see fewer and fewer iconic websites and iconic people because we tend to just blend. And what we really need to be doing is figure out what would be iconic, what would be memorable in 20 years. It might be the weirdest thing to do now, but it would become an icon. Those risks often pay off in becoming icons. So those were my 12 attributes that really matter that I've compiled and thought about a lot as I've been doing these interviews these past 20 years. And I encourage you, as you are telling your story and also telling your clients' stories in different marketing formats, that you think about those attributes that matter and that you be the best storyteller that you can possibly be in whatever format that you choose. So I think the stories that we tell are the stories that bind us and teach us and bring us joy. So thank you so much. And now I think we're going to open it up for questions. Thank you. Yes.
Okay, so yeah, we'll open up for Q&A. Again, we're giving away a little prize. We probably only have time for a couple questions, so
Okay.
it'll be an easy choice between maybe two or three
Perfect. Okay.
questions. So we'll have speakers come around. Let's come right over here first. Wait for a speaker to get to you. Right here, yeah. Tyler.
So obviously you have a lot of great content that you write, and a lot of us, content's really important for digital marketing.
Mm-hmm.
How do you go about finding your content and prioritizing it and getting it out there? I know a lot of times we do a lot of brainstorming, but we're not writers. It's not, that, I guess that's my question. How do you
Right.
find good content?
How do you find good
What's
content?
Your process?
I think it comes down to people, the stories of people. If you follow Humans of New York on Instagram or really any format, notice how they tell a story. And if you don't follow them, go follow them, because I think they're one of the best storytellers. In a paragraph, you learn so much. Every word is chosen so carefully. And it's because it's about a person, and that person's specific experience becomes a general story about the human condition. And so I love that. Another thing to think about is the platform you're on. So for example, we have all our printed magazines. We also have all the social channels and our website as well. And there are some things that make sense in a magazine that really don't on a website, and vice versa. And I've tried to be more specific about that. When the magazine started and there wasn't social media, we had some long articles that had a lot of maybe gray text because it was great content. But now I know that it's something that's really just text, that's going to be better on a website. A magazine's got to look good. It's got to have a really fun, editorial, iconic photo. It's got to be laid out right and be chunky, so we often have the right color for it. Instagram, I think, is a different beast than Facebook and Twitter. And so I think knowing the platform, knowing your audience, that's really, really key. Knowing who it is you're thinking about, what your intention is as you're connecting with them. Is your intention to tell a story? Is your intention a call to action? Those things can all drive your content. I also would say just be a voracious collector of content. I love magazines, of course, but other content as well. And I keep files. I have digital files. I have piles of just things that I like that. I liked that question they asked. I liked that font treatment. Just be a collector of ideas. And you might not get to it right away, but even just looking through it might spark some ideas for your content. I would say also mix it up. I feel like if content is too businessy, people it's so easy to skip over it. We like to skip commercials. We're fast forwarding things. We're skip it's what Chandra was that him that was saying that yesterday? We skip things so quickly. So being less salesy and more people-y. I really think it's all about the people, all about the faces.
Awesome. Okay, you have follow-up?
How do I have all forms. So I do have a filing cabinet of things I've literally ripped out or scribbled on a piece of paper, and I file that. I also have just a system in my email where I pull ideas all the time. And it's become a really hard thing of what I do, actually, is to vet all the ideas and remember them and get to them. That's one of the hardest things. But I just try and categorize it. I have a year planned out in advance, skeleton-wise, for my magazine. Like, I know if I'm going to do a history section in September, all year I'm going to be thinking, okay, I want really cool historical tidbits, and so I'll be gathering them. Or like the Fab 40 that I do all year long, I'm gathering ideas. One of the things we do that's popular is our celebrity lookalikes, which I've done it 19 years, and every year I'm like, are people still digging this? But yet every year everybody thinks they look like Taylor Swift or Matt Damon, so I get all these funny entries. But I would just say whatever system works for you, but be a voracious collector of ideas, and it will get your brain thinking that way. And I find other platforms too. So sometimes when I'm watching a movie, and it's not about magazines, but something about the way they presented that story will jog an idea that I could use in a different format. So just always thinking that way. And also people give me a lot of ideas. I end up doing probably half the stories I write are ideas people have given me because I ask them for ideas. And so that's been kind of a fun thing too.
Okay, we got two more. We'll first go over here, and then the last person right here.
Okay.
First off, thank you so much. I thought this was very beneficial, really, really cool stuff.
Thanks.
I really love the point about being a cheerleader, and we really hit that in our organization with our instructors and with our students. But sometimes it's hard because all you want to do all day is be a cheerleader, but when things are going wrong, there's moments for constructive criticism.
Absolutely.
I'm curious what experience you have or ideas you have with balancing that in terms of being a cheerleader while helping people learn.
Okay, that's a good thought. So first of all, I think there's always something going right. And I do think that behavior that gets recognized and gets rewarded gets repeated. And so I like to emphasize, hey, I loved how you said that, even if it's something as small as that, because then people will be like, oh, okay, they want more of that, even if it's just a subconscious thought. So whatever is going right, to emphasize that. Also, if you're talking about your students and employees, having that emotional bank account that's full, they know you care. It opens the door for you to be able to give that constructive criticism and say, I care about you, and I see so much potential in you. And I see one thing you could do that would magnify all of that if you could adjust this part over here. And then follow it up again with, and you're awesome, and that's why I'm telling you this, When you think about, your kids, if you have had your kids play sports, or maybe you've played sports, when the coaches ignore your kid, you're kind of like, oh, they don't even care. But when the coach is like, hey, I really need you to be there, really, you missed that, you kind of know, oh, they think my kid's capable of doing that. And so I'm appreciative that they're correcting their behavior. I think we can be those coaches for the people in our lives and show them that we care. Those are just some thoughts. It's hard, though, because you do have to do that. There are times you just have to have those hard conversations. And Crucial Conversations is a book that they have a book on training that really helped me. And one of the things they tell you to do is to phrase it, what I don't want is for you to feel like I don't care. What I do want. So you say what I don't want and what I do want. And I've used that strategy with my employees and coworkers sometimes is, what I don't want you is for you to feel like I don't appreciate this hard work, because I totally do. But what I do want is I want this to be exactly what the client needs, or something like that. So that's a good one. I would love to hear your ideas too about how we could do a better job.
That's great. Okay, last question right
Right
here.
here.
Hi, again, thank you so much for your talk. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks.
As a woman, what were the biggest challenges you faced in your industry, and how did you overcome those challenges?
Okay, that is a really good question. And I think being a woman has mostly been an asset for me, to be honest. I think that I have gotten invited to do more things and sit on more boards and participate on things because they need that token woman. But I don't feel that way. I feel like I'm just going to go and I am going to be my best self. And then they'll want other women, perhaps, in the future, hopefully. And so I just try and take whatever opportunities come, even if I know that, if I was a man, I might not have gotten it. But I really feel like that's been a blessing. I haven't reached out for funding. This has been a self-funded, bootstrapped adventure. I know women have a harder time getting funding. I've written about that. I've interviewed lots of people about that. That's a problem. That's really hard for women to face that. Probably the biggest challenge, honestly, that I've had is that balancing of roles. Raising a family and raising a business, that's not an easy task. And when I first started, I felt like I had fewer women doing that with me, and so that was hard. When I was with my stay-at-home mom friends, I would just talk about that because they didn't really want to hear about my work life. And my work life, I would just try and talk about work, and I felt like the worlds didn't collide. Technology has made it so a lot of women are doing more combination. Their lives are more of a combination, and men too, where our work and home life can be more intertwined. But that has been, honestly, that's been a challenge. I started my business in part to be able to be a mom, and then the challenge has been, okay, now I have this business that takes a lot of time, how do I still accomplish that original goal? But with a lot of creativity and some heartache and some Diet Cokes and some sleepless nights, it has worked for me. It worked for me. People often ask about balance. That's a really, really hard word. I like to ask people about it too. And the way I define balance is if you have a career you love and if you have a personal life that you love, cool. You're in balance. Doesn't mean the dishes are always done and whatever, but I think if you have two parts of you that you love, you're really lucky.